folks, so this is the big one, I guess. This is the bit where we get to add all the power to the car. And I'll start off the video by saying, do the diff and do the suspension first. The suspension video will come. I'm still playing around. I'm still trying to find out what the right answer or a list of good suggestions is. And the suspension and chassis mods will maybe take a few parts. But the remap is something I've had done for quite some time, and I've sort of made my conclusion on that. I'm really happy with the outcome of what I've done to the car, and so I've got absolutely no problem sharing it with you and giving my recommendation there. So when I bought the car, it had a JB4 on it, which is actually a really clever bit of kit. I won't go into detail about what it is, but it's fundamentally a tuning box. So the car was decatted and was running the JB4. So I think there was map 3 was the feisty one. Might be mistaken there, but it was a stage 2 car with the JB4. So it was making, I think I estimated it to be about 430 horsepower, something like that. It didn't feel right. You know, I had the M4 at the time, and the power delivery was so far removed from the M4, which was just so linear and enjoyable. So I wanted to go about things slightly differently, and I wasn't really that keen on the JB4 in that it intercepts the signals from the sensors before they get, and sort of manipulates them before it gets to the ECU. So I went to a company that's very well reputed amongst the M-Lite owners, and that's the Performance Centre in Sunderland. And they use, I think it's software called Custom Pro that they use. They do you a baseline, and then they do their magic and remap the car, and then they let you know how the car performs with the remap. So at the time the car was decatted, a very, very good Evolution Raceworks decat on the car. And I didn't really want the decat. It's not strictly legal on the UK roads. There's some issues with insurance around, you know, if your car's not properly legal, does the insurance count? It's all very boring. But fundamentally, I wanted to make sure I was just properly legal, didn't have any problems at MOT time. So at the same time, I fitted a BCS Sports Cat. It's a 100-cell Sports Cat, very nice bit of kit made by BCS. And you can tell by looking at it, it suggests that it's still going to flow very, very well compared to a standard Cat, or indeed some of the Sports Cats and the D-Cats. You look at them and you think, they've given no consideration to flow there. So we've got the lovely 100-cell Sports Cat from BCS and the Remap. So it's a stage 2 remap from the Performance Centre. And my car with the Sports Cat fitted made 365 brake horsepower, which is pretty strong, but it's pretty normal for these cars to make more than they should. And I think you get quite a bit of variation in the numbers as for standard cars on that dyno. But 365 is pretty indicative. A very quick car in its own right, and felt fantastic with just the Sports Cat. So I opted for the stage 2 map. And they gave it their best. They really did try to make sure that everything was right. I asked for less mid-range torque. I wanted the car to drive in a really linear fashion, so I asked them to sort of moderate the torque lower down in the curve so it was a little bit smoother, which they did superbly. I'll come to the drive in a moment, but they did that really well. And I finished up with 459 brake horsepower, so it gained nearly 100 brake horsepower, which is just ridiculous, absolutely bonkers. So a car that should have 340 horsepower, something like that, this now with just a Sports Cat and a remap has 459 brake horsepower. That's more than an M4 competition pack. And it feels it. It is properly quick. It is a really quick car. number is great. What I really like about this map, there's two things I really like about it. The best thing is the drivability. It is so drivable. The way that the boost builds, the way that the power comes is so linear. It's so much nicer than the JB4. So I'd fully recommend this. Anyone with a JB4 that's thinking, oh, should I remap it? Don't know about the JB4, do it. The car just drives so much better in every single mode. It is so much nicer to drive. It's smooth, it's linear, it's progressive. You pick up the throttle much better out of a corner without it going absolutely haywire when it comes on boost. I'd thoroughly recommend it. And the second thing is the top end. Before the remap, it felt so, even in the standard map, it just felt like all the power was in the middle of the map. And now it just builds and builds and builds, and you get that top end that I think's normally missing from the M140. So it makes really good power right at the top and rewards you for revving the car out, which is a really nice thing to add to one of these cars. I should add, my car was mapped with, I think it was Shell V-Power, but it's always run on a diet of just V-Power or Tesco Momentum, both 99 RON fuels. If I can't get either of those, I'll put a little of whatever else super unleaded I can find, but it's always been given the 99 RON, and so it was mapped on that fuel. So with the JB4, it was a bit of an animal. It was a bit of a handful. It felt like it had too much for the chassis, even with some of the chassis mods I put on the car. But with the remap, it actually feels so usable. I mean, the car's got too much power for the chassis still, but it doesn't spin its wheels everywhere. It actually finds really good traction, and coming out of corners is very usable. So the map has just improved the car in so many aspects. Fuel economy, for what it's worth, is probably about the same, all said and done. If you drive it fast a lot, the fuel economy will be worse. If you're economical with it, it'll be about the same. One nice little benefit of the remap actually is that Eco Pro is a little less arduous because it's got the extra power in every map. It's just a little easier to drive. It's still a little bit laborious. It still feels like you're waiting for it to do stuff all the time in Eco Pro, but it's just a little less hard to live with. You can leave it in Eco Pro a bit more of the time. So there's a nice little perk that I hadn't expected. In terms of the other optional extras that you get with the Custom Pro software, I didn't really opt for many. The speed limiter removal is one that you can have. I wasn't really worried about it because I don't think I should be driving at those speeds anyway, to be perfectly honest. I did have the cold start delete. I really don't like the cold start, and I feel like such an idiot when I start my car and it goes, you just feel like a prick. So I got that removed. When I first had it done, it had the BCS mid pipe and the Sports Cat, and to me the cold start was still a little too loud. They can't remove it completely because they have to make sure that the I don't know whether it's the engine or the coolant or the turbo or the oil. I don't know what it is that has to come up to operating temperature and what helps what with the cold start, but they have to leave something of a cold start there. They just remove the sort of the most embarrassing element of it. So that's something I would recommend if you prefer your car to be a little bit more subtle. One thing I did notice actually, the guys there at the performance centre, I didn't notice for a little while because I don't tend to use it very often, but they rescaled the sports display for me. You know, the little gauges that you get with the power and the torque, they rescaled those for me. It's quite cool. You've got the I can't remember what it goes to as standard, but I should imagine it's sort of 360 horsepower as standard, the scales. And they changed those to be, I think it's 460 or 480, I think it is now. So I'll show a little video of those. It's really quite cool. It's not that accurate. It sort of obviously comes from the various sensors that the ECU has and sort of predicts a sort of horsepower. But you know, the big number at the top's about 460, which is about what the car made on the Dyno. So it's pretty cool, and it's a nice to have. You get in the car, you're taking someone for a ride for the first time, you can put the sports displays on still. Any negatives? Not really to my mind. You do find a little bit of fuel surge on track if you run the car sort of half or less on the fuel tank. You'll run into fuel surge issues, so you have to keep it topped right up. That's probably the biggest negative. And of course, with anything like this, you void your warranty. So if you have a problem, you've not got that to fall back on. This car is coming up to 3 years old, so less of a concern. And it would still be a horrible thing to happen and a huge outlay that I've never planned for. But the engines on this car are quite cheap for what they are. In fact, they're sensationally cheap. They run at about £3,000 for a really good low mileage engine, which is very, very good. And it means that worst case scenario, unlike the full M cars, where I just could not afford for that to ever happen. You know, M2, M4, M2 Comp, you know, you blow one of those engines up, you are in for a big bill. With these, because there's so many of them, get wrapped around lampposts, the engines, should the worst happen, are actually fairly reasonably priced, or very reasonably priced for what they are. But still, it would be remiss of me not to point out that you remap it, you know, you add a bit of risk there for yourself. It might be that you can get away with a warranty claim. Don't know. I sort of did it on the basis that as soon as it's done, the car had been JB Ford anyway, so it was a bit less of a risk for me. But yeah, you do that, you take on the risk that goes with it. So let's finish on a high note. We've been through the negatives, but the positives outweigh them so heavily, in my opinion. The car is just amazing. This car probably stands me, by the time I've messed around with all the chassis stuff, it's going to be about a 25 grand car. 25 grand, 460 brake horsepower. That's ridiculous. It's still wrapped up in this really practical, usable car that you can do anything in. And now it's got 460 brake horsepower. It's just fucking bonkers. It's so quick. There's always going to be something faster, there is, but it's just crazy. I mean, this is a serious hill. and it is just surging up it. Big hill. It's so damn fast, and there's a car with a trailer. It's a good job the brakes work now. Yeah, this is a quick car. It delivers the power beautifully. Go do it. If you can afford to risk the warranty, go get your car mapped. Go give the guys at the Performance Centre a shout. I don't have any financial association with them whatsoever. The only reason I went to them is because they're well reputed, and they have put a stunning map on this car. JB4, stick it in the bin, go and get a remap. The car is just brilliant. So if you want to find out what I've done to the car to make it use that power and put it down to the ground and make best use of it, stick around on the channel, subscribe to us. Will's got an M140i as well now, so we'll have some videos coming up on what he does with that. I'll continue this series of sort of turning this car into something that sits maybe halfway between a standard M140 and a full M4. So stick around, subscribe to the channel, and hopefully there'll be some more really good videos on these cars coming soon. I mean, there's always going to be something faster, there is,